Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are joined today by my colleagues and friends that I will introduce very shortly. And just wanted to say a few words about CLAB for new members in the group and for old members, and really just to kind of commemorate the time that we're in right now. I feel grateful and lucky to have been part of CLAB since it was created in 2015. And what started as a continuing legal education program and network has grown into the go-to association for professionals in the cannabis space. And this panel really is a full circle moment, again, to have my friends and colleagues on here who have all contributed to the creation and the success of the Florida medical program to talk about the very important topic of adult use in Florida. So just wanted a couple of housekeeping notes. Everyone, please share your contact information, website, business information, comments, questions, all the above into the chat. Definitely intend to make this a very interactive and collaborative discussion. And I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces or familiar names and some new names as well. So very happy to have everybody on here today. Actually, back to the housekeeping, October 14th and 15th at the Diplomat Hotel, the 7th annual CLAB conference will be held. And this is going to be an emphasis on smart and safe, yes on three, supporting the adult use initiative here in the state of Florida. So hope that everybody on here can join us in Hollywood or Hollandale at the Diplomat Hotel on October 14th and 15th for our 7th annual CLAB conference. And lastly, I want to thank Trulieve, Smart and Safe, Florida for Care, and Dr. Michelle Weiner for sponsoring and joining this webinar today. I'll let everyone individually give a short little intro, but like I said, I'm very grateful to be on this panel of my esteemed friends and colleagues. So Lauren, would you mind just giving us just a little intro on yourself? And yes, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Daniel. Lauren Niehaus, Executive Director of Government Relations for Trulieve Cannabis. I'm also working on this other little project that we've got going on called Smart and Safe Florida, which is Yes on 3 to bring adult use increased access to all Floridians this November.
Awesome. Thank you. Dr. Weiner.
Hi, my name is Michelle Weiner. I'm an integrative pain management physician, founder of NeuroPain Health. And I've been practicing cannabis medicine since 2016 when we first were able to in Florida. And so a lot of what I do is helping people use cannabis to decrease pharmaceuticals, get off their opioids, improve their well-being, treat many medical conditions, but mainly give them education and help them in the process so they feel comfortable, and as well as personalize it so that people are able to use this medicine for themselves and then empower them to take care of their own health as well. Thanks.
Thank you. And Mr. Eric Stevens. Sir, you're on mute.
First rule. Other one, Eric Stevens here with Florida for Care. Formerly, it was United for Care when we were a political committee. We had to go through a similar process to get on the ballot. We did it twice in 14 and 16 because of the 60% threshold, and we didn't get that in a non-presidential year. But Florida for Care is a 501c4 social advocacy nonprofit, and really has kind of been a messaging continual voice on implementation and making sure we have a robust, strong medical program and continuing to educate, whether it's through the emergency orders or telehealth. And now kind of just looking at making sure we preserve what is the largest medical market as adult use, seemingly is coming here to the state.
Awesome. I want to say thank you again to everybody for joining us and also for all of your contributions to the success of our medical program that, has gone back 10 years now. Right. So here we are, and we're going to jump right into it. So I'm going to ask a series of questions, and I'm going to have each member of the panel start off answering the question, and then we'll open it up to discussion amongst us. So first question for Lauren, please. What is the legal framework of Amendment 3? And what will happen if it is enacted, if it is approved, and what won't happen when it is approved? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. So the drafting of this amendment goes back years. As folks may or may not know, Florida has a multi-phase process to get something onto the ballot. The first of that is drafting some airtight language before you even are able to go out and get your signatures. We've seen twice in the past amendment language not be approved by the Supreme Court, which is a key component of the process in Florida. But this year we did, and that is because we followed the guidance of the court from the past two failed amendments, who wasn't for lack of trying. But this year we were hyper focused on the single subject requirement and ensuring that the language is not misleading. If you recall back, there were some previous amendments that had both adult use and home grow that found to violate single subject, and one amendment that didn't specify that Florida legalization would not result in federal immunity because it is still federally illegal. So this ballot language addressed that. Oral arguments were held back in November. They kept us squirming until the very last day that they could make a decision on this, which was the afternoon of April 1st of this year. And now we have the clearance to move forward into a campaign mode to educate voters. And to your point, Daniel, about what this is and is not, there are things that we would love to see in this that we knew would not pass Supreme Court muster. There's a reason home grow is not in here, and it's because it didn't make it past that single subject hurdle in the past. The beauty of Florida, for better or worse, is that we have a ballot initiative process and we have a legislative process. As you all know, if you're following this thing, the ballot initiative process is extremely time consuming and expensive. The Florida legislature has put these roadblocks in to make this a challenging process. You mentioned the 60% threshold. That's the next challenge on November 5th this year. But we do have the opportunity for legislative change. And so some of the things that aren't included here, it doesn't mean that they won't ever happen in the state of Florida. It means we need to take step one, get this thing passed, go back over to the legislature and make additions such as criminal justice reform. They have the opportunity and the authority, both inherent and as called out in the initiative, for additional licensing structures. And they have absolutely the authority to implement home grow legislation, which we're hopeful with the right education and lobbying efforts, that is it's not a no forever in Florida, right? That it's something that we can hopefully at least bring to the medical program at minimum.
Thank you for that explanation. Eric, Dr. Weiner,
Yeah.
please chime in.
Well, so I kind of want to add to that, right? So single subject is super strict. She just mentioned two of the technicalities some of the other amendments had that caused them issues. I mean, there's another amendment someone was trying to collect signatures on. It was like multi-pages that come apart, and you need to basically the whole reasoning behind that is so that you're not misleading voters as to what you're going to be asking them, and that the ballot title and summary is like pretty straightforward on the topic of concern. And so that's the reasoning why. I mean, we had the same issue. We wanted to put home grow in for medical. We're told that it probably wasn't going to pass, and so that's why we weren't able to do so. And I mean, there's a variety of other things you'd love to put it in there or not. But the constitutional amendment process, with what it cost, I mean, we at least got an answer back. Took a couple months, but they literally made them wait until the last minute. So, from a process standpoint, and then once it passes, it then has to go to the legislature for all the implementing regulations, which, took a lot longer with ours, but there wasn't necessarily an infrastructure in place do any of those things sooner than later. And I know there's some things that have been written in to create kind of some deadlines for when the legislature needs to act on. We tried to put some of those in ours too, and they kind of went by those between legal challenges and other things. But, those are other things that can kind of come up, but a lot of this is still left to the legislature once we get past that.
Yeah, and Eric, that's a good point on the way that the language is written. It's self-implementing, right? So it says in the language of the amendment that 6 months after the amendment passes, which is May 5th, 2025, this is implemented, and so that means the legislature has to go back to work sometime between November and May of next year to pull together a holistic implementation package. And if we've seen 23 other states do this. Ohio's still in their implementing phase. It can be done, and I think taking lessons learned from other states, both lessons learned that we don't want to do and lessons learned that we do want to do, can help the legislature speed up. To your point, Eric, we're not starting from scratch. There is an existing medical program, and I've seen successful other states implement adult use by taking a page of the book of the medical program and mirroring that over on the adult use side.
Great points, and I think that that's a good segue into our next question. Dr. Weiner, if you could lead this one. What are some economic and social impacts of legalization considering relevant precedents, so other states, right? What examples we can refer to in other states and what might happen in Florida as a result?
So I'd want to start by just saying that we as a state and also a country have the highest rates of addiction and opioid overdose and anxiety and depression. And so if we zoom out, obviously we need other solutions, right? Like just being a physician able to practice cannabis medicine is a great option. And a great harm reduction option for so many of them. Am I?
Yeah. We can
Or
hear
am I
you.
going?
No, yeah, there you paused again.
We got most of it, but
what? It's you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So my point, need other solutions, and I think that our medical program is really based on safe and legal access. And so what the biggest point here is the fact that there's this huge black market. So many of my patients are constantly getting cannabis products and they don't know, is it Delta 8, is it Delta 9, is it lab tested? And I think the biggest issue is really the fact that we need safe and legal access to cannabis. And I think that education is always core to any type of medical decision. And when it comes down to it, for me, people who use cannabis, for the most part, even if you call it adult use or recreational, there is some medical intention behind it. They're using it to relax, they're using it to sleep better, they have pain. Whether or not they're looking at it as a medicine or a drug is their own impression. And so I think the bigger issue here is the fact that how could this affect our medical program? There's a part of me that actually thinks people should get their medical card before adult use passes, because we don't really know if the medical program would change. And then the other component of that is the fact that taxes are going to be, we don't know what the taxes are going to be. So people who are buying, the same dispensaries are going to be selling adult use and medical programs. And what are the taxes going to be for adult use versus how much is it going to cost a patient to go to their physician and buy the same product? So I think a lot of this has to do with finances and understanding how much they're going to be taxed. And at the same time, when you do have adult use, there's more jobs, there's a lot more money in Florida, and so there's obviously economic benefits. However, to a patient or to a citizen of Florida, they may want to even still consider the medical program based on taxes, I would say. And then I think either way, people need education. So they're always going to have some type of condition where maybe they're an elderly person who has pain, or they have cancer or Parkinson's, and yes, they can go to the same exact dispensary and go to the adult use side and pay more taxes, but maybe they do need the education and the hand holding and slowly implementing them into using cannabis. So there's many different social and economic implications. I think it's a matter of understanding over that 6-month period, if it does pass, how much of an input, we can have. But what we've seen in other states is really the fact that there's a lot of patients that do consider the adult use. However, because of money, some will still consider to continue working with their physician. So it's a good time to understand the implications of using cannabis as medicine, and really like redefining the plant, because I think the plant is naive. However, the way that someone judges it, or the stigma behind it, is really their own personal perspective. But I think in general, the entire medical field is starting to be more open-minded to cannabis, and so people are really starting to understand this is a medicine, and regardless if they buy it adult use and don't have a card, or from their physician, they're using it as medicine.
Great insights, and agree wholeheartedly for sure. Eric, Lauren, tell us what you think about what the impacts could be, and there are many.
Yeah, and I think, a couple of people who are on this webinar have heard my my genuine spiel on this, that I think there's an opportunity for the medical program. And to your point, Michelle, I think that now's the time for education in terms of what patients should know and why patients should stay in the program. You're right, we don't yet know the tax. I think we absolutely should expect one, but once we do know that number, there is a drop-off point where it makes more sense to keep your medical card and not pay a tax on your product than it does to be in the adult use marketplace based on your purchasing behavior. And so I think that we'll get some clarity with that in time. And I also anticipate that, we saw a preview from the legislature last session about potency caps for adult use, flower, concentrate, other. And I think that we're going to see that again. And I think that what it does is it puts the medical program over here as the not the worst thing in the world anymore, and lets the legislature kind of leave that alone, but for making enhancements to it. And then anything such as THC caps or sales limits that goes over onto the adult side, the goal is to work with the legislature, all of us collectively, to make sure the medical program is not only undisturbed, but that it's improved. And so I think we're going to have some opportunities next session, and for every session for the rest of time, to continue to make those tweaks. Folks ask me often, oh, why do you guys work with the legislature in state X? Isn't it legal there? Yes, however, marijuana is a topic that folks constantly want to tinker with, for better and worse. And so I think we'll see that in Florida. And again, I think we should all collectively view it as an opportunity to improve the medical program and make sure that the adult use program provides the access to the non-patient community.
Agreed. And the potency caps will definitely be something that we'll be dealing with, for better or for worse, most likely next year and probably thereafter. Eric.
Yeah, and I think I think they hit on the majority of kind of the major, social and economic aspects, right? Whatever the tax is, that will be able to go back towards schools or infrastructure, or maybe it'll make the card costs for patients less. Clearly, I think some of the initial states, when they were changing over, had some hiccups and issues, but I think a lot of the newer states that have started to come online, the more I've looked into it, have tried to make sure that they aren't disturbing their medical patients, and have skipped the line, have some other things that kind of allow or alleviate, on top of maybe some of the other things that y'all mentioned there. So, but I mean, people, I think if it passes, there's going to be less, crime and illegal, sales, contaminated products people are taking. I mean, I think there's like the social aspects are hugely positive on something like that. I mean, there wasn't really an opportunity to discuss any of those aspects as related to the medical market because, you know, that wasn't necessarily going to get rid of an illicit or criminal market or change any of that. It may have done that for patients, but it didn't necessarily do that for others. So I don't think people should be put in cages for something that's never caused an overdose death. But I think it's a question of how and making sure that we make sure that we protect and do everything we can for patients. So, but I think we have some good ideas in place that I want to work through, and a big couple physician conferences next week. I'm going to be talking to doctors at and seeing kind of where everyone's issues are and what we may be able to do on.
Excellent. So kind of to double down on the pontificating, if you will, I'd like all of us, each of you, to kind of give your opinions about the post-legalization regulatory landscape, meaning and what states could be, a good model for Florida. And what I mean by regulatory landscape is that our medical program is regulated by the Office of Medical Marijuana Use, which is part of the Department of Health, and the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services is involved in commercial kitchens and production of edibles. So I guess if we're crystal balling, and I think we've all heard some potential avenues for which agencies could potentially become involved under an adult use program. So if you could, and with reference to model states, just sort of let's have a discussion about what the regulatory landscape could look like post adult use in Florida.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. I think that again, looking at what states have gotten it right, I have a bias towards Arizona because I worked on Prop 207 back in 2020. And I think that state has done a pretty good job of bringing an adult use program. Well, maybe they were one of the quickest, and we had adult use within, I think it's like 88 days of the vote. So they had their act in order and did a lot of work behind the scenes to create an implementation package so that consumers could have access sooner rather than later. And that's important for both the illicit market piece, but we've seen examples of states who have waited way too long to implement adult use. And then it's hard to get things back on the right track if there's years between a vote and an implementation date. So Arizona is an example where the Department of Health Services oversees both programs. I don't know where this ultimately lives in Florida. I do think there is some benefit into keeping it under an agency that's already been dealing with the topic and has dedicated resources to know what this world is, to know how inspections go, to know what consumer safety is. So I'll be interested to see where it lands in Florida, but I have seen successes in other states where there's either a creation of a brand new agency or it coexists with the medical program. What I think we've seen, I don't think we've seen, what we have seen is in some states, whether it's for medical or adult use, if an agency is given the marijuana program and they don't want it, they don't want to touch it, they don't want to deal with it, it creates a very hostile and difficult to work in regulatory environment for operators, which ultimately affects patient and consumer access. So I'm hopeful that we'll get it right in Florida. I think we all know that Florida is a leader of a state and wants to see things done right. And I think there's a real opportunity here for the state of Florida to get this implementation right.
Agreed.
I think it's an interesting time because we're talking about descheduling or rescheduling cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. And we happen to be talking about having adult use in Florida at this time. So, and I think it looks pretty good that the federal government may reschedule cannabis to Schedule 3, which of course would be great because we would be able to do research. And that's really what we need is more studies looking at the plant and specific conditions and dosing and things like that. I think that people also have fear that people are going to just be smoking cannabis, publicly everywhere, right? And I think that similar to alcohol, you can't drink alcohol on the beach, you know, you can't, like, there's going to still be certain guidelines and regulations about using cannabis. So like our medical program, you can't use it in public. Or perhaps you'll have those cannabis lounges where you need to have like a certain licensed for like a consumption license to actually do that at a restaurant. So it's interesting to see how they're going to regulate it. But I think that I don't think we're going to go to the point where people are just smoking cannabis outside. I think there's going to be a lot more regulations and you know, and we'll have to see what happens. But at the same time, you never know, because we have a medical program that, like, they are always talking about the THC cap and going back and forth, and how we have one program, but yet we're always trying to adjust it. So I'm hopeful that they'll make a good decision, but at the same time, really create strict guidelines so that it is safe. We do have access, but people are not exposed to things that may harm them.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as far as kind of the regulatory body model, you know, clearly the OMMU has a ton of staff, resources, has been doing inspections on any and all of this. You know, the majority of, I think, what they're doing wouldn't change a ton. And so whether that stays in the Department of Health or whether that, you know, group moves over to an ag or a DBPR or somewhere else, I don't think that, you know, there'll be a ton of change as far as that. I think the timeline aspects, you know, could be, you know, important. You know, clearly which state they're trying to be modeled on may make a difference. And, you know, a lot of that remains to be seen. And I think that's kind of what we need to be having some conversations on. You know, what are some of the good things that were done in Arizona? What can we pick on that? Maybe there was a thing or two from Nevada we liked. Maybe there was something from Massachusetts, or you know, one of these. Like, I think there's some different things. I mean, I just saw something about consumption gardens in DC openings. And, I don't think we're going to get there necessarily in Florida being, you know, considered. But, you know, another thing in some of the reports and studies and research that I've looked into, I mean, some of these aspects, whether it be a home grow or a public consumption thing, some of them are slow to roll out, some of them are quicker. But I think we have the ability to look at other states and see, you know, what could be done, what's possible, and then we also have to live in the reality of the legislature and, you know, what they consider may or may not be causing, you know, more public safety issues. But there's not one state that allows public consumption of cannabis. Florida is definitely not just going to be the first on that. So, you know, I've already seen localities and others limiting hemp consumption. So that part, I think, is going to change. Now, I hope it's not changed at the level where they're, like, you know, trying to create new felons for little petty things like that. But I think if it's done in a smart way, that you know, we can not have, whether it's people that don't like the smell or whatever the case may be. You know, this is not just all of a sudden everything's allowed everywhere. It's not at all. This functions.
Totally agree. And the biggest hurdle, as we've mentioned, is, well, the biggest hurdle is getting this on the ballot, and we've done that. So now the next hurdle is getting the 60% vote, which is beyond a landslide. It's a mandate. So what I want to talk about now is what are the actual legal implications of Amendment 3 passing, right? We know that it will allow for MMTCs to sell adult use product to adults over 21. But it will have other implications for residents and people that travel to Florida. And I'd like to talk about that. So Lauren, if you want to lead just as far as more of an in-depth conversation about this passes, assuming this passes in November, it's enacted, or it goes into effect in May. assuming, of course, there will be an implementing bill that will modify and change and restrict and do a number of things. But what will happen from a legal standpoint upon passage?
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. I think it's important, especially for folks who haven't gone through one of these transitions yet, to add adult use to the medical program. Is there are, and somebody pointed out Maryland did a great job as well implementing, knowing where you want your people vote on this. We're going to get past 60%. And then folks need to be educated. I will tell you what has happened in every other state is dispensaries gets phone calls that night. Can I come and buy it now? So they're eager, they're paying attention, and the answer is no, not yet. We need to have this thing implemented. From a functional standpoint for tourism, it should be. If I'm an adult, I have a valid ID that proves I'm 21 plus. I can come in, I can purchase whatever the purchasing limits are. We know the possession limit in the amendment is 3 ounces, 5 grams of concentrate. The legislature could toy with a daily possession limit. Those are kind of things that we don't know. Legally, from the municipal standpoint, we know that already there are some cities who opted out of having MMTCs. So those cities would need to go back to their city council or whatever their process is to amend ordinances that wouldn't ban an MMTC. Because of the language of the amendment, if I'm an existing MMTC, I will have authority to sell both medical and adult use. It will be through the licensing structure as it is now. Existing MMTCs have access. I think we all know that we're awaiting the issuance of a number of additional licenses, which I think is timing important, right? Hopefully they get on that sooner rather than later so that those folks have access to open up and get into the marketplace before adult use sales start. And one thing on the municipal level to remember is that municipality cannot make it more restrictive than like the zoning regulations, more restrictive than that of pharmacy. So those will remain the same for the adult use piece. I think that we'll see very similar security provisions and other operational provisions that we do see right now under the medical program. There's no need to interrupt what's already working. And so what we look for in a successful implementation program is where the legislature or the deciding rulemaking body decides the point at which you're either purchasing medical cannabis or adult use cannabis is at the point of sale. And so that all of the product that comes in today comes in as it does. But if I'm not a card holder in Florida, I can now use my ID to purchase subject to whatever limitations the legislature puts in. But I think that from a legal perspective, we will have, because of how tight the amendment is, that we will have success in having existing MMTCs implement by that or on that May 5th, 2025 date. So tourists will listen, there's confusion in the marketplace already because of, illicit cannabis, because of Delta 8 shops and things like that. So a couple of weeks ago at an airport, I had a Florida resident convince me that it's already legal in Florida. And I said, okay, great. We're going to agree to disagree, but please vote yes on 3 in November. So, there's a lot of education that needs to happen. And that's what the campaign's working on right now. It's a heavy lift to get to 60, but there will be a lot of voter education opportunities in the next 5.5 months.
That's definitely the double-edged sword of wearing yes on 3 swag in public.
Someone suggested that I go to take a Florida beach vacation and get a yes on 3 cabana or tent or something. I said, no, then I'm going to just be talking all day long.
That's true. That's true. And Eric, Dr. Weiner, definitely curious as to your opinion about the legal implications. One thing that is important to me, and I think is very important about this initiative, is that it would legalize possession. So this is very much a criminal justice, win, assuming that this passes, right? We're talking about eliminating criminal penalties for something that is utilized as a pretext for a number of arrests, not only in the state of Florida, but not unique to the state of Florida, but something that nonetheless is very important. So, Dr. Weiner, Eric, please let us know your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it passes, clearly the major thing is that, you know, possession would be allowed. There's a lot of questions as to who, how, what, where, and what the rules behind that would be. But, you know, the one thing we never were able to put in our amendment that I did see they put in there was the possession limit, you know, for flower as well as concentrates. And so, I think it was smart to get that in there, even if they do try and pull some odd purchase limit, which seems like there may be some legal challenges there, but I've seen it done in other states. So I trust others are kind of paying more attention to that. But yeah, I mean, you know, there's a jail cost. There's the, you know, time that police are spending, you know, wasting their time on this instead of violent crimes. You know, I think a lot of the opposition stuff that I've seen about things being less safe in the communities just isn't true. When this happens, violent crime usually goes down. So, you know, I think there's a lot of social justice, criminal justice benefits that you wouldn't necessarily have seen with, you know, our medical amendment. And so, yeah, I think those are some of the biggest ones as it relates to, I guess, kind of the legal implications, specifics.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot more transparency. So people are going to actually know what they're getting. And I think that it's going to give people an opportunity who are not feeling as well to potentially use cannabis as an option to help them in ways that maybe they weren't aware that cannabis could do that for them. So, you know, that is like the one of the benefits of having adult use is the fact that people who are struggling, who maybe don't want to go see a physician or don't know who to go see to get their medical card or don't think they qualify, are able to actually start to use cannabis to treat whatever medical conditions they have and not really call it a medical card, right? It's the same exact product, but they don't need the medical card, but they're using it for medical use again. So, and I think there's going to be a lot more safety, because even today I had a patient who was like trying to fight me on that Delta-8 is the real THC, not Delta-9. And like, you hear all these, you know, crazy comments about like these other cannabinoids and things that people read. And, you know, now they're really able to learn because they'll be going to the dispensary. They'll be able to get into a dispensary, get some education. And a lot of the people who are, again, working in the dispensary are now treating medical patients. So they're getting educated. So now people who are buying it without a medical card will still get some type of education. So again, education for me is always the most important, but I think just having proper access where people are not needing to go to a vape shop and then worry, is this vape safe or not? Or is this Delta-8, or does it say like CBD, but it really is intoxicating? So I think that will help with just overall wellness, really, and giving people an option where they're not being judged, the way that a lot of people who are starting off in the cannabis process are, because there's a lot of people who really use it every day. They're just not they're still not buying it from dispensaries, and whatever their reason is, whether it's stigma or money, and now they can actually have access to safe products. And most of the people who come to me who really do know, who have been using cannabis for a long time, they don't know anything about cannabis. They just know that their dealer gives them flower, and they don't even know, what hybrid sativa indica is. So I think it's really going to open up some education and help people personalize it, and then give people another option. If they want to treat their anxiety and not have to be on their benzos anymore, then perhaps they can use that as an option. So it'll give people opportunities, and I think it's a very unique time in medicine in general.
Definitely agreed. And thank you for the good work you're doing in the wellness field, and for helping so many of our friends and family members here in the state of Florida. we've addressed the major questions that I wanted to talk about, and thank you again to all the panelists for your expertise and your opinions and your time. There's quite a few questions within the chat that I would like to talk about and address, if that's okay with everybody. So, Eric Rogers, this is a great panel. Thank you very much. It is. Yes, it is a great panel.
Agreed.
Mr. Polo asks, are there yes on 3 awareness events being held till voting, etc.? The answer is yes. There are a number of them. Mr. Polo, we can connect offline and I can share with you a number of events. Not every day, but definitely every month leading up to November. And definitely want to remind everybody again that on October 14th and 15th at the Diplomat Hotel in Hollywood, Florida, the 7th annual C-Lab conference is being held. And it is going to be in conjunction with the Yes on 3 campaign to get out the vote and to do just that, to make sure that the community at large in Florida, the voting public, is aware that this is on the ballot. This is a good thing. This is going to prevent people from being arrested for something that they never should have been arrested for. And it's going to provide access, safe access to people that are not going to have to worry about having a criminal record or criminal ramifications for access to a plant. So next, I don't want to butcher your name, Arnaud Dumas de Raleigh. I believe we actually met a long time ago in Las Vegas. Mr. de Raleigh, good to see you. Is there anything being done about the flavor ban bills pushed by tobacco in every state that are geared towards nicotine vape and not cannabis? This would dictate a distillate market for all, same product. It takes time to erase that confusion from legislators' minds. So that is a great question. And yes, there are bills being passed in other states to restrict flavoring inside of tobacco. And if we could analogize to the existing medical market here in Florida, there are a number of advertising and marketing restrictions specifically tailored towards preventing access by anybody that is not supposed to have access to it, but also anything that could be considered attractive to children. So I don't know how that may relate to flavor or how flavorings within certain products, if that will be addressed in a prospective implementing bill for adult use. But it is a good question, and it is definitely something that that is happening in other states. So I guess a follow-up to that, how can out-of-state industry players like the ancillary industry help with resources and time for Amendment 3 to pass? Well, you're in the right place. You're among the right group of people. And it sounds like we need to have a further discussion about how you can get more involved and contribute to the cause. So thank you again for that question. And that answer goes for anybody watching this, anybody attending this panel, and anybody watching this panel. Please reach out to me. Please reach out to Smart and Safe. Anybody on here about how you can get involved and how you can contribute. Thank you for the question. Moving down. How are you planning to regulate the planting and growing of the cannabis in the fields? So I believe the answer to that question would be part of an implementing bill. I don't know whether or not the cultivation of adult use cannabis would be regulated differently than the way that medical marijuana is grown in Florida, which require to be tested for potency and safety and heavy metals and a number of different potential contaminants. So the product that is currently being sold in Florida is safe and tested. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but happy to have a further discussion about that at another time. I'm answering these questions because I feel that I have the answers to these, but if anybody wants to chime in and they think otherwise, please do. Okay, this is more of a comment than a question. Today on the news was a report on the University of Toronto study that showed teens that use cannabis within the last year had a higher risk or at a higher risk. New York Times had an article about other issues because daily marijuana is outpacing drinking in the US. Do you see rescheduling as an opportunity for more money to be allocated for federal studies for cannabis for risks and benefits for individuals and strengthen a more positive message? Yes. Yes, the answer is yes. And as Dr. Weiner mentioned earlier, we are moving towards cannabis being rescheduled at the federal level from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. Schedule 1 drugs are considered to have no medical utility. And I would say that how many states have at least a medical program? 40 something states at this point. I know for a fact that each of those states, the attorney generals within their state, as well as other leaders within all of those states have sent letters and have come together to say each of our individual states recognize the medical utility of cannabis, and so should the federal government, right? So it's been a long process to get to where we are on the federal level as it relates to rescheduling. And to answer your question, Amy Wall, it is the rescheduling of cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 that will allow for the testing and the studies to be done on a grand scale to answer your question specifically, right? So to be determined, we're all paying attention not only very closely to the progress here in Florida, but also to the progress at the federal level for rescheduling. And it appears that it is moving at a quicker pace than previously.
Yeah, Daniel, if I may, just so folks know, we're in the public comment period for rescheduling right now, which is a part of this rescheduling process. I think as of this morning, there were thousands of public comments in. So we're going through those right now to see what is positive, what is negative. And that, I believe it's July, was July 22nd. It's 60-day public comment period because it fell on a weekend. It comes out to being 62 days. So I think you're going to see a lot of noise on both sides of the issue over the next couple of months, but we should have some more information out of the federal government to answer some of these questions in the July time period, which I think just helps to elevate the discussion, which will continue to elevate the Florida Amendment 3 discussion as we march closer to November.
Excellent, thank you. This is a comment from Nurse Laura. Maryland is doing a great job. Michelle is right in hoping we don't have public consumption. However, it is tough to enforce. Thank you, Nurse Laura. Jason Stark asks.
Can I touch on the studies out of Toronto and New York Times?
Please, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of those studies are very flawed. The information isn't clear. We don't know whether these people are using products from legal market, whether they're things that have been laced. There's not really as much of a control group typically. So I think we need to look at those, but as much as we can, have actual facts and have more studies about, what the reality is, I think that's helpful. And I think the rescheduling will certainly be something that should allow for more of that, because the Schedule 1 only allowed, for the most part, studies to be done on its negative aspects. But there's a lot of researchers that are doing research in Florida. They're also having a conference next weekend for Orlando. And a lot of that is looked into, studies in populations, but it hasn't necessarily been the placebo, double blind, all the other things that have been asked. But I think we're getting there.
Thank you, Eric. There's a couple questions effectively about an implementing bill and whether or not the proposed bill would allow for horizontal licensing effectively. And Jason and Maxwell, those are great questions. You're definitely not the only one curious about those questions, and nobody knows at the moment, right? The
Right.
bill allows for the legislature to create more licenses explicitly, and they have the ability to do that. If we are looking at the medical program as for precedent, SB 8A is the implementing bill for Amendment 2. And that bill actually was brought up on a special session after the 2017 legislative session. Based on the 6-month timeline, it appears that because our legislative session is staggered and would begin in March in 25, will begin in March in 25, that the possibility for a special session prior to March, January, February, seems like that could be a possibility.
Yeah, and Danielle, I think I think we all, again, there's a lot that we don't know. Verticality, does that stay? Does horizontal market come in place? Are more licenses issued? Just remember what inherent authority the legislature has, including calling a special session at any given time. I think that we would anticipate that they do that. I think based on listening to hearings and conversations this past session on, isn't it premature to be talking about X, Y, and Z about adult use before we even know if it's at that time, if it's on the ballot, but at this time it would be before we know if it passes. So I think that if I were to look into a crystal guessing ball, it might be closer to the election or post-election. But I think that session ends like the day May 4th or something. So I can't imagine them running to the very end of the session next year, because they're going to want to give whatever regulatory agency oversees this thing the time to be able to successfully implement, so that we don't have product shortages, which we've seen in a few other states, and so that we don't have this chaos and confusion, because we do have certainty. We know that it implements in May, and certainty is a beautiful thing when it comes to creating an implementation regulatory structure.
Agreed. Arnaud, I will definitely reach out. Thank you for sharing your email. Ron, thank you for your comment. Hope to see you soon. Hope you're doing well. And what appears to be our last question on here. Once the federal government reschedule MMJ, would FDA have jurisdiction for the safety and effective of this new Schedule 1 drug like others?
Do you want me to
Possibly.
pop in?
Possibly.
So I think that every former FDA official and attorney has said that is, look how the FDA has handled the issue on CBD and other cannabinoids, and they've asked Congress to take action. I think that you should anticipate no disruption to the state legal medical programs or adult use programs, because the FDA just doesn't, it would have to take money out of its other food safety budget in order to regulate any state. So I think we see fewer changes than folks have feared throughout this process. Time will tell, but I think that the signs and the discussions and all of the legal minds that have been working on this believe that there will not be an impediment to the state programs as they're already operating. And so that's something that we should all sigh a breath of relief on. The last thing that we need is to have these 38, 40 state legal programs upended in any sort of way. That's, I think we all know that has so many disastrous consequences. So we as an operator feel good with the information that we have been given thus far by federal officials that the existing state marketplaces will not be disrupted even after we have a Schedule 3.
And I'll just say that's really interesting, because MDMA is potentially going to be FDA approved soon, and Florida actually is one of those states that then has to determine how they're going to roll it out. So there's some states that like automatically they adopt what's going on with the FDA. Florida, however, doesn't, and there's no time limit. They can just decide whenever they're ready, if they're ready to implement that. So I think that's interesting about the state of Florida for FDA rescheduling.
And of course, FDA, Food and Drug Administration, is a federal body that is involved in regulating food and drugs that cross state lines, right? So when we're talking about intra-state programs, I'm not sure of the FDA's jurisdiction as it relates to particularly non-drugs. I mean, that's just my opinion. Anyway, this has been a really great panel. I have really enjoyed it. And thank you to everybody that attended and listened to us and stayed the length of time. If anybody else has any more questions, we are coming up on the 1 hour mark. And please ask your questions now. Or if any of our panelists have any closing thoughts that they'd like to share.
No, well, to some of the first questions on people getting more involved, where they can learn more on the Smart and Safe site, Lauren, is that, I guess, the best place for people to go right now and sign up? I saw you can register to vote there or check your voting status, because I know there's been some changes in the state here with that. And then will they get kind of alerted if people are out at events or different things are happening?
Yep, that's exactly right, Eric. smartandsafeflorida.com. You're going to have information compiled there. You can check your voter registration. You can donate. Follow us on our socials as well, Smart and Safe Florida or Smart and Safe FL, depending on the social network. And subscribe to get their email alerts. Join our coalitions, our veterans coalitions. We'll be rolling out physician coalitions and others to engage various stakeholders over the next few months. So please, we are super supportive of anybody who is able, willing to help support this effort. It is not a foregone conclusion. This is a big lift for everybody involved. And so we need all supporters to align and join us as we push this towards November 5th.
And I think it's a good reminder that we should all continue to respect the cannabis plant and use it intentionally. So people who are using it should not overuse it. And even if they have access to it, they should use it with an intention.
Thank you. Eric,
Awesome.
close us out.
What's that?
I said, close us out. Tell us.
No, I mean, this was a great discussion. Very, I think, exciting time. It's really difficult to get something on the ballot. There's a lot of education that we can continue to have and do here. I know me and Lauren are on the same panel talking to a bunch of doctors next week on this, and I think that is a good time to kind of talk about any thing as it relates to medical. And then it's clearly we have the entire Republican Party of Florida came out against the issue. So you're gonna have a lot of elected officials that are going to be telling people this isn't safe, this isn't going to be a good thing. And I think we just need to make sure that the correct information is available and out there, regardless of what the topic may be. I don't think that intellectually, honestly, just kind of telling people lies so that they won't do something about that. So I think as much as we can kind of just be providing good information, getting out there and learning as much as we can, and making sure that people just aren't sitting around thinking these things pass on their own. They need to actually get out, get involved, and it's something they care about.
So up on November 5th, we'll need you all.
That's right. Yes, on 3.
Yes, on
Right.
3. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for participating. Thanks, Daniel, for having us.
Absolutely. Lauren,
Yes,
Michelle,
Cheers.
Eric, Robert.
Thank you.
Everybody, thank you so much.